The role of drugs in the prison system, life inside the walls. The rain was coming down in sheets the night Detective Lena Rourke arrived at Redstone Correctional Facility. It wasn't her first time walking into a prison under emergency conditions, but something about this call felt different, heavier, like the air itself had turned electric. A guard met her at the entrance, soaked and pale. "Detective, we've had an incident." They hurried through a maze of dim corridors until they reached the infirmary. Inside, 2 inmates lay on stretchers, pale and shaking, their breathing shallow. Rourke had seen overdoses in the outside world. Back alleys, motels, abandoned warehouses, but never inside a prison this tightly controlled. "What happened?" she asked. The warden, a stern man named Dale Harrow, wiped sweat from his brow. "We found them minutes before lights out. No violence, no signs of assault. But something got inside, Detective. Something potent." Rourke moved closer to one of the unconscious inmates. His fingers were stained with a faint, powdery residue. She touched it gently, not enough to disturb the evidence, but enough to see its strange, chalk-like texture. Not typical narcotics. Something synthetic. Something unpredictable. She straightened. "What did they take?" Harrow shook his head. "We don't know. Not yet. But whatever it is, it's new." The infirmary lights flickered overhead. Rourke's partner, Agent Morris, entered the room carrying an evidence bag. Inside was a torn envelope, the kind used for personal mail. The paper was discolored, edges frayed. "This was found under one of the bunks," he said. "We had canines sweep it. Nothing. But watch this." He tilted the bag. A faint dust drifted through the plastic. Rourke frowned. "That dust, that's what they ingested?" "Possibly," Morris replied. "It might have been soaked into the letter, then extracted." Rourke's mind raced. In several real-world investigations, synthetic drugs had been smuggled through written correspondence. The ink and paper themselves infused with chemicals nearly impossible to detect. If someone had found another method. Rourke turned back to Harrow. "Who handled this envelope?" "Mailroom staff," Harrow said. "We already isolated them. But here's where things get complicated." He led them down the hallway into the mailroom. Stacks of envelopes sat in locked bins. On the center desk was a box of outgoing mail, perfectly ordinary at first glance. Until Rourke noticed something strange. One of the envelopes had a slight shimmer. Not ink. Not water damage. A chemical sheen. She picked it up with gloves. "Who received this?" Harrow looked ill. "We can't confirm. The logs were modified." "Modified how?" "A staff member's login was used," Harrow said. "But that staff member hasn't been on duty for 3 days." Rourke felt a chill creep down her spine. Someone's bypassing your system. Someone inside knows exactly how to exploit the weaknesses. Before Harrow could respond, a guard burst into the room, breathless. "Warden, we've got another one." They rushed to cell Blocky. An inmate sat on the floor of his cell, trembling, clutching a torn piece of paper. His pupils were blown wide, his skin drenched in sweat. Rourke knelt beside him. "Who gave you this?" He shook his head violently. "It was already in my books. It was already there." Rourke looked up sharply. "Books?" The guard retrieved a paperback novel from the cell. Inside the cover was a folded sheet, faintly glossy, not standard paper. Rourke held it under the light. Invisible markings shimmered across it, chemical streaks, almost like fingerprints. She stood slowly. "This isn't random smuggling. This is coordinated." Harrow clenched his jaw. "Coordinated by who?" "We've tightened restrictions. We've upgraded scanners. We've increased staff training." Morris exhaled. That didn't stop Baltimore in 2015. It didn't stop Georgia's system-wide network. It didn't stop synthetic drugs from entering California through letters. Rourke nodded. "And it won't stop whoever is behind this." They moved toward the security office. On the way, they passed inmates pacing restlessly, eyes darting, whispers spreading like sparks in dry grass. Drugs inside the walls didn't just cause medical emergencies, they shifted power. They created debt. They invited manipulation. Someone was building something. Inside the control room, Rourke stared at the surveillance screens. Movement looked normal. Routine. But then she saw it. A group of inmates in Block B exchanging small, folded notes, quick, subtle motions. Nothing overt. Just a passing of paper. But Rourke recognized the color of the paper. The faint sheen. The chemical glint. "Morris," she whispered, "zoom in." He did. It was the same glossy paper. The same modified texture. Rourke's pulse hammered. "Someone's distributing this," she said. "Not in large quantities, micro amounts. Enough to influence behavior. Enough to build dependency." "Dependency breeds control," Harrow said quietly. Rourke nodded. "And control creates power." Then the radio crackled. "Warden, you need to see this. We found something in the old storage room." Rourke and Morris followed the guards down a narrow corridor into a disused wing. Dust hung in the air like fog. A single bulb flickered overhead. A guard pointed to a metal locker. Inside were stacks of envelopes. Not mailed. Not stamped. And beside them, a bottle of clear solution. Rourke picked it up, turning it under the light. "We'll have to test it," Morris said. "But I'm betting this solution is how the paper gets modified." Rourke stared at the bottles, the envelopes, the hidden stash. "Someone is turning this prison into a distribution hub," she whispered. Harrow looked horrified. But who would risk that inside a maximum security facility? Rourke didn't answer. Because in that moment, she noticed something. A faint set of initials etched inside the metal locker. Initials she recognized from the modified mail logs. Her breath caught. "These initials," she whispered, "they belong to someone who shouldn't have access anymore." Harrow stepped closer. "Detective, whose initials are those?" Rourke inhaled sharply. "They belonged to an officer who left this facility 6 months ago." She turned toward the dark hallway. "And he didn't leave willingly." Detective Lena Rourke stared at the initials scratched inside the locker. "Sure. Jacob Renner. A former correctional officer terminated for misconduct 6 months earlier. He wasn't charged, just dismissed quietly, a decision that now felt less like resolution and more like a warning ignored." Warden Harrow stood rigid, his jaw tightening. Renner didn't handle mail. He worked security rotation. How could he have accessed this room? "He knew the system," Rourke said. "He knew blind spots, badge overrides, storage keys. And if someone inside kept his badge active after termination." Morris finished the thought. "Then Renner never actually lost access." A guard entered with a clipboard. "Detective, we pulled visitor logs. Renner hasn't been on site since his last shift." Rourke shook her head. "He wouldn't walk through the front door. This isn't coming from outside. Someone inside is still running his pipeline, maybe learned it from him." A cold realization cut through her chest. Or Renner trained someone before he left. The warden exhaled slowly. "So, what, we've got a ghost operating through active staff?" Rourke glanced at the glossy envelopes stacked in the locker. Their edges reflected under the flickering bulb like shards of glass. "Not a ghost," she said softly. "A system." They took the evidence back to the operations room. As technicians photographed the stash, Rourke laid out the timeline. Synthetic substances arriving through letters, extracted from book pages, powder residue, modified paper sealed in envelopes, all coordinated. This isn't one person. This is a distribution method. An inside economy, Morris added. Once drugs start circulating, debts form. Debts lead to leverage. Leverage leads to manipulation. Harrow rubbed his forehead. "We've tightened mail protocols, doubled inspections. And still..." "You're fighting a strategy," Rourke said, "with procedures that criminals have learned how to bypass." Before Harrow could respond, an alarm blared overhead, sharp, sudden, echoing down the steel hallways. "Medical emergency in Block B," the intercom announced. Rourke and Morris sprinted, guards clearing the path. When they reached the block, officers were clustered around an inmate collapsed near the stairwell. His breathing was shallow, pupils constricted. A thin sheet of paper was clutched in his palm. Rourke knelt. "Where did he get this?" Another inmate spoke from behind the bars. He found it in his laundry. Wasn't his. He just touched it. The paper, just a touch. Rourke felt her stomach twist. This substance is more volatile than we thought. 2 medical staff lifted the inmate onto a stretcher. As they passed, Rourke noticed something in the corner of his cell, a small tear in the mattress. Inside it, barely noticeable, was a slip of chemically altered paper. Morris removed it with tongs. "Stash spots," he said. "Classic." But Rourke shook her head. "No. Look at the precision. Same cut size as the others. Same sheen. These aren't improvised. These are being distributed intentionally." A guard approached nervously. "Detective, there's something else. Check the back of the paper." Morris flipped it over. Rourke froze. Printed lightly, almost invisible unless held under the right light, were 2 letters. "These aren't Renner's initials," Rourke whispered. "These belong to a current staff member." Harrow paled. "Who?" Rourke answered without hesitation. "Rebecca Marwin." Silence fell over the block. Marwin was a long-time administrative officer, quiet, efficient, rarely drawing attention. She managed documentation, supply logs, and mail routing. "She's been here for 13 years, Harrow murmured. "Never a single complaint." "That's exactly what makes her perfect," Rourke replied. A guard approached cautiously. "Ma'am, should we bring her in for questioning?" "No," Rourke said firmly. "Not yet. If Marwin is involved, she's careful. She's methodical. She wouldn't slip unless she wanted us to see something." "Wanted us to?" Morris echoed. Rourke nodded grimly. "We found 2 sets of initials, JR and RM. One belonged to a terminated officer. The other belongs to a veteran staff member. Whoever is running this knows we're closing in." The warden frowned. "Then why leave initials at all?" Rourke lowered her voice. "Because they're not initials." The room fell silent again. Morris stared at her. "Explain." Rourke placed both pieces of paper side by side. "JR. Not initials," she repeated. "Codes." "How can you tell?" Harrow asked. "Because the letters aren't random. Renner's file lists him as Renner Jacob. Staff logs list Marwin as Marwin Rebecca. If someone were signing these, they'd match the naming format. But the order is reversed, deliberately." "Meaning?" Morris asked. Rourke pointed to the letters. "JR. Then she rotated the papers. The letters mirrored each other perfectly. "Someone is telling us these messages are part of a sequence," Rourke said. "A pattern designed by more than one person." Harrow swallowed. "A partnership?" "No," Rourke replied, eyes narrowing. "A network." The radio crackled again. "Control to Central. We have officers reporting disturbances in multiple blocks. Inmates are becoming agitated, asking about mail delivery. We're seeing movement patterns we've never logged before." The warden turned toward Rourke in alarm. Rourke's pulse accelerated. "It's starting," she said. "Detective, what is?" Morris demanded. Rourke slowly lifted the chemically altered sheet of paper as its surface shimmered faintly under the lights. "This isn't just contraband," she whispered. "It's currency. Influence. Whoever controls it, controls the inmates. And someone inside this prison just turned that influence on." She looked up at the surveillance monitors where inmates were gathering in small groups, murmuring, exchanging looks, tension thickening by the minute. "They're not distributing drugs," Rourke said. "They're distributing power. Subscribe for more real crime documentaries every week."